Come on in. I'd like to point out there are cookies in the back, and help yourselves. Get up as needed. My name is Jackie Bach. I'm the Vice Provost, and I welcome you to Teaching at Scale, Engaging Students in Large Enrollment classes. This is, well, let me just sort of start about how this came about. So last semester, we worked with a group of faculty and department chairs on infusing work-based skills into their classes. And very often when we would talk about a teaching strategy, we would hear, oh, we can't do that, our class is too big. All we can do is lecture. So, we got to thinking with the faculty who were working with us last semester, how great they were and how they managed to do some of the things that we hope we can do in our large classes. So we invited the 4 faculty, 5 actually if you count Dan, in front of us, who all teach large classrooms to kind of share with us the best practices that they use with their students. So I think you're going to find today delightful. We'll have some moments where we'll ask you to participate while they demonstrate some of the strategies that they use, and then talk a little bit about their philosophy on engaging students in large classrooms. We're not making any promises, but we're hoping that this might turn into a series where we can look at other challenges that come with teaching large classes, assessment, communication. So if you have any ideas or feedback, please let us know. And with that, I don't really have a way to introduce Dan other than to say I'd like to introduce you to your Faculty Senate President and Associate Professor in Political Science, Dan Tirone.
Thank you, Jackie, and the Senate is very pleased to partner with Academic Affairs on what? Oh, no worries at all. I'll make sure we get our sufficient credit here. But no. Yes. No, absolutely. This has been an effort that has taken a lot of cooperation, and we're very pleased to be able to work with Academic Affairs on this, and I'm personally pleased to be able to participate, moderate the panel, and learn from my colleagues on how to improve my own teaching in my classes of about 75 to 100 students. I am pleased to have with me today Dan Capron, who is an associate professor in psychology and teaches courses of approximately 350 students in an in-person psychology class, which is made up mostly of freshmen. Before coming to LSU, he taught at another university, not to be named, where class sizes were approximately 20. And so he had to very quickly learn how to upscale his teaching and engagement once he arrived at LSU, and he's done a fantastic job with that. We're very pleased to have him with us. Maribel Dietz is an associate professor of medieval history in her 30th year of teaching at LSU. She teaches History 1001, Western Civ to 1500, an ILC course, which has a typical enrollment of 175 to 300 students. While her students are mostly first-year non-majors at approximately 90%, there are also students from all levels, including seniors who enroll in this in-person class, and she has also taught the class as both hybrid and online. Zacchaeus S. Wilson Kennedy is the Ron and Dr. Mary Neal Distinguished Associate Professor of Chemistry Education and the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion within the College of Science at LSU. She teaches or leads Chem 1201 and the Chem 1100 series, which typically enrolls 250 first-year students with some mix, and these classes are in person. And David Young is an alumni professor of physics and teaches mostly juniors in General Physics 1 and 2. The typical enrollment is 330, and the class is taught in person. And this will matter more to you now, having just completed the Olympics every 4 years, but he was a competitive curler for over 20 years. So you now know what that is in sweep. So we are pleased to get started here with putting into practice what we are going to discuss with you today, and we're going to invite Dr. Dietz to engage in a demo to get us started.
Okay, can people hear me? Yes, 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 okay. So I generally will start my class or sometimes end my class by getting the students to interact and, yes, actually using their phones, as I see you're using right now. And I also, when I'm going to do this, I like to have some paper copies as well. Someone who doesn't have a phone or their battery is down, et cetera, et cetera. So my question I'm giving to you is not the question, or the questions I'm presenting here are not the questions I give to my class. Often what I'm giving to my class is some questions about the previous lecture and some areas or ideas about what they're unclear about or where they want to go. The reason I use the Google Forms, and this is very, very, very easy to do because I am not super tech savvy. This is a pretty easy thing for me to do, is that I can do this anonymously for the students. Sometimes I'll have the students write down their names so they can get credit for being in class. And then as you're all doing this, I am seeing the responses come in real time. The question that I'm asking there is about what student engagement in a classroom looks like. And I have stolen this from Zakia when we were having our planning meeting. But often students in large classes, as we all know, want to blend in, hide, sleep, and feel often by just being there that is enough. And trying to get the student to engage and engage with the activities, the different things going on. Now, people's ideas about what engagement is can vary. You know, maybe engagement is just paying attention, taking notes, good notes on a laptop. There's some of us who don't allow tech, and so we don't have, we're doing paper notes. Some of us try to do some in-class assignments, and things can get loud and messy. Some people like quiet. And so anyway, when I'm doing this, and so the students will know as they're walking in, we'll have the QR code, and I'll then write when class is about to begin. We'll give them 2 more minutes. And I've asked you all here to kind of check off things you think are engaging in class. And wow, so far I'm a little surprised. Participating in class discussions, having class discussions, showing engagement is sort of winning out here. What I use with the Google Forms that I use to do this, depending on the question, it's also very easy to sort of turn it around. If it's a question about, retention of some information or an approach to something that we had just covered, I can quickly show the students what the results were on the computer, and so they get to see that. This is also a kind of low-stakes way to sort of wake people up and get them engaged. So now I have 36 responses. When I turn back to you, Dan, I'm going to read through these responses and get back to you as to what people are saying.
Absolutely, thank you. And so while you are continuing to submit your responses, I thought we would get the panel started here. We know that when you walk into a classroom and it's a large class with over 100 students, that can be intimidating to the faculty member, but it may also be intimidating to the students walking into a classroom with that many of their fellow students in the room. So I wanted to start asking our panel, what do you want students to feel when they come into your classroom, and how do you prepare them to learn in that environment? So Zakia, perhaps if I could ask you to get us started.
Sure. So the thing that I hope most that my students feel when they walk into the classroom is that they are happy to see me and that they know that I'm happy to see them. Why is that relevant? I teach chemistry, right? And that is a challenging course. And so students often come into those spaces with a lot of emotions and a lot of thoughts, right? And so at the very least, I hope that they when they walk in, that they know that I'm happy to see them and that they are happy to see me. Learning is an incredibly messy process. It's a challenging process. I hope that when they walk in the spaces that they know that that's part and parcel for the course, and that they're willing to embrace that process, fearlessly embrace what is going to be uncomfortable at times, and that they know that I value them, that I deeply want them to learn, and that I'm there to help guide them through that process.
Thank you. Excellent response. David, perhaps you could follow up. What do you want students to learn when they walk into the classroom? Or what do you want them to feel?
So I was on a panel maybe last week, a student panel, and we were talking about, sort of the experience at LSU and what it would be like. And I said, well, I teach a classroom with over 300 students. As you could see, some of these kids are just like, Or their jaw dropped, okay, because maybe their high school didn't have 300 students in it. And so the worry is that students go into a room that's large like this and they're able to hide, right? They sit in the back or they feel, they're scared, right? They're terrified, or they're afraid maybe that they would say something that's wrong and they would look foolish in front of their peers and things like that. So you try to make them comfortable and say, look, guys, this is where we learn. There are no wrong answers here. Right? I mean, if you answer incorrectly, we'll fix it. We'll understand, your thought process, why you chose that answer, et cetera, and be supportive and just say, hey, it's not the best environment, obviously, having 300 faces stare at you. But there are certain techniques and kind of devices we can use to make it more enjoyable for them and to make them comfortable. And, just to piggyback on what Zakiya said, it's true. Whether you're teaching 300 students or 20 students, when you walk into a class, what you want to do is to tell them why they're here. Because many of them don't have to take this course, especially in these large service courses. It's not part of their major, so it's like, I got to take physics, right? And they're dreading taking this course. And so try to teach them why it's important, why you're in here, and what you're going to get out of this class. And I think once that's done, then they kind of loosen up a little bit, and they're like, okay, this guy's not out to get me. He's here to help me, and I think they relax a little bit.
Terrific. Thank you. Maribel, are we ready to proceed with the results from the quiz?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
Quiz, not a quiz, not a quiz. I try not to use the word quiz. It's always kind of an in-class assignment, in-class activity. It's something to get sort of the juices flowing. But again, I'm sorry. Oh, I forgot. Okay. Again, participating in class discussion is the winner in terms of and showing that they're paying attention. When I'm reading the questions you guys put down here, how do I keep them from falling asleep? How do I deal with taking attendance? How do I deal with, I can engage the students willing to learn, but how do I deal with those who are absolutely indifferent? In terms of taking attendance, I will often use the easy QR code thing to do an attendance taking. I tell them to put there's a question that'll say, put your name, last name first, and then your first name to do attendance that way. But it's everything that my colleagues have said, creating an atmosphere where it's okay to stumble and it's okay, I don't know, that you're in a community of people learning. And I think, too, showing that, we too are constantly learning and learning from the questions our students are giving to us or the ideas our students are giving to us is important as well. I will share this for everyone who's registered. I'll share these responses if you want to see them in an email with you. But it is a very easy thing to do. Some of you have asked how you go ahead and do this. If you have just a Google account, and I can show you afterwards how easy it is. And again, if I can figure out how to do this, it is something that I can easily teach others to figure out how to do this.
Thank you. And Dan, if we can have you address the question, just to sort of wrap up this initial part of the seminar, what is the one thing that you hope students feel when they walk into your large class?
So this panel has been a great chance to reflect on these kinds of things that sometimes we take for granted. And so for me as a psychologist, one of the findings I'm always talking about is bad is stronger than good, right? Think about it in your lives. And it's thought because of evolution, it made more sense for bad things to stick with you. I've talked to so many students who raised their hand, who answered a question, and then who felt kind of dismissed by a professor or their classmates because they were wrong or off track, and they stopped going to class. They stopped answering questions, right? They shut down. So that's part one, a psychologically safe space. And then part two is probably my own inattention, is I want a sense of adventure. I want the class to feel like anything could happen on any given day. Is today worth paying attention to? is something that I want the students in the first minute of the class to say yes to. And those things can kind of be competing with each other. If you have safety without adventure, you have a bunch of students sleeping. And as you can hear, I have a very monotone voice, so I'm not exactly the perfect person to be up in front of 350 people for 80 minutes. And again, if you have adventure without safety, then you kind of have chaos. So I'm kind of balancing those two things constantly. So can a student say, am I okay in here? And is today worth paying attention to within the first minute of class? That's my goal.
Terrific, thank you. Having discussed our objective, so what do you want the students to feel? We'd like to get to the question of what is the strategy you use to get them there? So as teachers, we each have our own approaches, and in fact, there's probably as many approaches in this classroom to engagement as there are, individuals sitting with us today. So I'd love to ask each of you to share a teaching strategy, routine, or design choice that you use consistently that increases student engagement. And as part of your response, it would be great if you could address questions such as, what is the strategy, routine, or design choice that you make? Why do you think that is effective for your students in the context of the course? How does it help you meet your own interpretation of engagement? And what is the student feedback? So what do students tend to say formally or perhaps after class informally to you about how this approach worked for them or ways that they thought that it could have been tweaked to increase engagement in later classes? So once again, Zakiya, if it's okay, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. All right. So when I think about engagement, I think about this in terms of 4 pillars. Behavioral, like what are they doing? What are the actions that they're taking? Cognitive, are they engaging in critical thinking, and how am I structuring things to support that? Affective, are they motivated? Am I fostering opportunities for them to show interest and to explore interests? And then social, for me, that's do we have group work? Are they collaborating? What kinds of discussions are we having? Now, this is all in the chemistry class, so put that into context. All right, so from a behavioral standpoint, one of the things that I do at the beginning of every class period is I put up a roadmap slide, and that has all of the relevant dates. It has my contact information in there. It has where they can get all of the course materials. So that keeps us on track. And I make sure at the beginning of every class period that we're on track. This is what's coming down the pike. I announce exams 3 weeks beforehand, and it's a countdown every class period up until that exam. You have an exam in 3 weeks. You have an exam in 2 weeks. So it keeps them on track. And so that helps with that. And that's one of the strategies we use for that. For cognitive, we have a lot of opportunities to do active learning in our classroom, and we do the formerly known clicker questions. We do a lot of those as share pairs, so that we're encouraging conversation as they're working through the problems. It's not so much so that I want them to get the problem, I want them to think through the problem and giving them the opportunity in a low stakes way to think through the problem, because that is the skill set that I need the most from them. We've embedded case studies where we use Moodle as a mechanism to get students to work through those. And those case studies provide real-world scenarios that they can talk about, even in a general chemistry class. And so we connect the content there, and we try to make that relevant. For effective, one of the things that I did this semester, y'all, is brand new to me, is I tilted both my syllabus and some of my assignments. And so TILT is transparency in teaching and learning. And so for that, what we're doing is to indicate to the students the purpose of why they're doing each one of the activities, why is this important, the task, what are they expected to do, and how is it that they're going to be able to get a good grade from this assignment? Like, what's the criteria for success? Trying to add that relevance, which my colleagues on the panel have already shared about in an ongoing way, I think help students to understand why they need to engage and why this thing is important. And to put that front of mind consistently has been really good for us. And the last thing I'll share is my class, and this is something that's interesting. So I've done class notes as a collaborative in-class assignment. So my notes, I have a student version. The student version has not all of the notes in it, so they're having to take notes during the class period. I've slowed down to ask more questions as we're doing those notes so that I'm not filling that in. Like literally I'm asking them what should go here. And so we're talking through it before I show anything on the notes. So that collaborative problem solving is impacting both cognitive and social through discussion engagement within the classroom. And that has been very helpful in supporting the students and staying engaged real time with the material. It's challenging in a large classroom. It's not always a quiet space. And for folks who are not comfortable in non-quiet spaces, it can be very disconcerting. But the kinds of engagement that I'm trying to foster is what I'm trying to do there. And so I give up that nice, clean space for the messiness of learning. What I've found is things like putting up the roadmap at the beginning of class. Students have said they're never lost. And so they thank me because they are not blindsided by an exam that they forgot to look at the syllabus for that's coming up in 3 days. In terms of the problem solving, sometimes they like that, sometimes they don't, but it's good for them, and so that's what we do. And related to some of the other things, some of it's a work in progress. I mean, just to be honest, like what I've learned both through the work that I'm doing and the collaboration with others who are co-teaching the class is that we implement some of the same things very, very differently. And there's great growth in both recognizing that and realizing that we're going to do things differently, and that we're in this ongoing process of learning of how to engage our students, even as they change every semester. With that, I should be quiet.
Absolutely fantastic response. Thank you. David, now might be a great time to get into our next micro demonstration and the polling activity.
So one of the things I want to discuss that I've used for a long time now are electronic response systems. Okay, and there's probably a dozen or so of these platforms that you can use. Maybe some of you heard of, like iClicker, Turning Point, Top Hat, Kahoot, Quizzes, right? So I've used almost all of these at one time or another. And so what it does is, because kids have their devices, iPads, iPhones with them, they can answer questions in real time. And so teach a physics course, there's a lot of problem solving that goes into that, so we do a lot of that together. But in order for them to be able to solve the problems, they have to understand the fundamental concepts. And so that's primarily how I use the clicker questions, is to see how well the students actually understand the concepts we went over. So I'll lecture for a little bit. I try to keep it short, like maybe 10 minutes. Then I'll ask them a question, okay? The questions are very low stakes, and so I don't want the clicker questions to be a source of frustration for them. So they're sitting there and they're like, he just lectured. I don't understand what he just said. And then they click and they get it wrong and they feel like they're losing points, and it's very discouraging. So the way I set up the grading is they get 0 points if they don't answer. They're not there. Okay? They get 1 point if they miss the question, and they get 2 points if they get it correct. We have about 50 or 65 questions throughout the semester. Okay? And I keep playing with where to set the clicker grade threshold, because that's kind of driving my attendance, because they know they have to come to class to get the points, and if I make it too easy to get full credit, then they quit coming about 3/4 of the way through the semester, right? And they can earn 2 points per question, so if there's 70 questions, there's 140 total points, and so I got to set the maximum maybe about 80 or something like that. The reason you do that is because, yeah, my phone didn't work, my battery died, I forgot to bring it, you know, or I missed class that morning because I had a doctor's excuse or whatever. You know, and 20 years ago, then they'd write their name on a little piece of paper, and you walk out of the class with all these people who have, you just don't have to do that anymore, right? Because there's so many extra points that they can get the, they can get the extra credit, and it's fine, okay? So what I tell them is, if you come to class every day and you miss every single question, you will still get full credit for your clicker score. That's kind of how it's designed, okay? And then I walk around the room. And so I use it as kind of a teaching tool for me. I'll ask the question, I walk around the room, and I just eavesdrop. I listen, and I encourage them. I say, this is not you answering by yourself. Talk to your neighbor. Spin around the 4 people that are close to you. Use anything you want but AI. Call your mom. Get everybody talking about physics. It doesn't matter, okay? And I'll walk around and I'll listen. Because I learn things by hearing how they're interpreting the questions that you write. Because you think you understand the question, it was perfectly clear, right? It makes complete sense to you. Students may interpret those questions very differently, okay? And so by listening to that, I think, oh, that's what they thought when I was asking that question? So it can be illuminating sometimes, and then it sort of helps you to write better questions as you move forward. Okay. So let me see if I can, I just threw this together using, it used to be called Quizzes, but now it's called Wayground. So you can either snap that QR code or go to joinmyquiz.com and enter that 6-digit code. Keep the names at least PG-13. I used to, some of the old systems like Kahoot, you get, like physics sucks and this kind of thing, right? It would just, yeah, it's kind of funny. Curling rules, yes it does. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start it. So here's your question. What is most responsible for the mass of a tree? This is not really a physics question, but I like this question. You can talk to your neighbor if you want.
This is the exciting thing, too, that happens when you're doing things like this, where your students get to talk to each other, and this is how they meet each other, because they don't meet each other anymore except online.
4 seconds. Okay. So we've got answers in every category. 3 people answered air, 24 answered water, 10 answered soil, and 9 answered sunlight. So would one of the people that answered air like to defend their reason for choosing that? Go ahead. Yeah.
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. Okay, well, yeah, plants use carbon dioxide through a process of photosynthesis. So maybe that's where the mass of the tree comes from. A lot of people chose water. Anybody want to defend water?
My thought process is that most of human mass is water, so why would it be a tree?
Humans are like 65% water. We're alive. Trees are alive. Trees need water. Makes sense. Okay. How about soil? Yes, sir.
I just know whenever I have the same plant, but I have different size pots. Bigger pots grow bigger.
Interesting. Okay, good. And sunlight. Anybody?
I put that, but I didn't know the answer, so I just put sunlight.
Sunlight's important, right? It's kind of responsible for all life on Earth. That's where the energy comes from. And so, okay. Any other thoughts about it? Should we re-poll? Yes. So some of you want to change your answer?
Did nobody cheat and look it up?
No.
Well, that's good. That's good. Okay, we have to, hope we don't have to restart. Okay. You get to log back in again, sorry. And so as you're logging back in and revoting, I mean, you can kind of get the idea of how this would work. And in the context of a physics course, there are a lot of concept questions we could ask about the direction of the current in a circuit, for example, and under the influence of a changing magnetic field. Kids talk to each other, and then I'll have one of the students, right, defend their reasoning as to why they thought that should be the answer to try to sway the opinion of their classmates, and then we'll revote and actually see if it changes. There's probably a way to re-ask the question without having to go out, but you can tell I don't use this system very much. So, okay, let's start it. Somebody had AI up by now, right?
Is there a way that
So for this system, I don't know. My guess is it probably does keep track of the grades. The system I use is Top Hat. It has a nice grade book, and I could just incorporate that right into Moodle if I need to. Yeah.
Do you use Top Hat?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Me too, and half my students always say they can't get a connection in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, we did have a serious issue with that at the beginning of the semester too, because they upgraded all the routers, and then it was an infrastructure issue. But it's gotten much better since then. So yeah, it could just be that it's an IT issue as opposed to a platform issue. Yeah. Oh, you're a good motivator. How about that?
I just learned it from my senior high school.
And it is air, yeah. So trees are mostly carbon, and they get their carbon from carbon dioxide in the air. And so, yeah, this is a great question, because you do get a range of answers over those 4 answers, and then it's a nice example of how you can get audience participation to defend, one answer over the other. This would work also well in like a political science course, for example. If you're studying like environmental policy or something, you can talk about global warming, you can talk about carbon capture, and then show that the mass of a tree does hold a lot of carbon. So. Any questions on response systems? Or?
Well, thank you, David. That was really outstanding. Dan, if we can go back to you. A question on a teaching strategy, routine, or design choice that you use consistently that you find increases student engagement.
So I wanted to talk about start and stop rituals. So as Dan mentioned, I was at the University of Southern Mississippi for 8 years. And when I got there, they said, nobody likes teaching research methods in senior seminar, so you're the new guy, you get to do it. Well, when I got here, nobody apparently wants to teach 350 people intro to psych. You're the new guy, you get to do it. But all of the things that in 8 years I had honed and developed to teach 20-person classes, all of a sudden were, I don't know if impossible is the right word, but a lot more challenging to scale up, right? And that's why all of us are here. So I had to kind of start from scratch, as a mid-career professor, which wasn't easy. One of the things that was mind-blowing to me is when I was kind of learning, what intro to psych was going to be like. I was very intimidated by a 350-person classroom. And some of the professors who had already taught it here said, you just kind of get used to the chaos. And one thing they specifically mentioned is that people will just be rolling in to class the first 10 minutes. You'll just get used to it. Don't worry about the distraction. And about 10 minutes before you're done, people will just start packing up. They'll be loud. They'll be moving their backpacks around. They'll be stepping over other students. And I was like, we got to do something about this, right? So I thought back to a large lecture class I had in undergrad where every class we started with an opening chant. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. So right when the clock hits 12, if I'm teaching at 12, I go out there and I put up my hands, just 3, 2, 1, and they know the chant. It's something like, it's like 2000, woo! Because I tend to teach a lot in the afternoon, and we know from circadian rhythm, right, the afternoon, somebody asked about students falling asleep. Again, my monotone voice, I put students to sleep like no other. I need to raise the level of arousal to an optimal level of arousal. And then as a licensed clinical psychologist, there's something called opposite action. If you're sad and you're listening to sad music and you don't do anything, you're going to stay sad most likely. But if you just act behaviorally in the opposite emotion, a lot of times our emotions will follow. So I tell the students, I know that not all of you want to be here right now. You're thinking about a date that you're going on. You're thinking about football. You're thinking about a video game you want to get back to. That's okay. But if we act like we want to be here by chanting excitedly, you're going to actually make it more likely that your emotions follow and that you want to be here. So that's been a fun thing. It was really rewarding. A group of students at graduation found each other from my Psych 2000 class and recorded themselves doing the chant and emailed it to me. So I think it builds safety. It builds, a sense of a team. And these classes feel so anonymous, right? So that's like something that they can kind of connect on. And then in terms of the ending, right, the packing up and leaving before you're done, I tell them, the first day of class, this is an issue, and I paint it as a problem for them. You guys don't know when class is going to end. You're nervous. I'm not going to end on time. You have other stuff to get to. I understand. So I'm going to make a promise to you. I will always end class on time or early, and I will always end it by giving you these well wishes, and it's going to be the same words every time. So it's a bunch of stuff that coaches say. I feel like coaches have actually really good psychological little nuggets that people remember. And it kind of ends with use psychology for good, because we talk about, right, how psychology can be used for good or evil. So I'm teaching you all this stuff about psychology. Go use it for good. So they know when they hear the little 4 lines, class is over. They pack up and go. And it works wonderfully. I have almost no one leaving early. And when someone does, they police each other. They say, he hasn't said the thing yet. So that's my design choice that, is low effort, any of you can do, no technology involved, right? And I highly recommend it. So a start and stop ritual.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Maribel, in addition to the exercise you demonstrated earlier, what is another teaching strategy, routine, or design choice that you use that increases student engagement?
Well, one thing that I will do is, and again, this changed over my time teaching. I used to be very, very concerned with making sure I got through all my material. I had to get through all this material, and then I'd start lecturing even faster, trying to get through my material. And at a certain point, I had this sort of, revelation that, most of these people are not going to be history majors. They're not going to even be historians. What do I want them to take from history and what we're doing? And part of it was what my discipline is about. There's an idea with history that it's just that stuff in the past, done and dusted, and we're just sitting around, reciting dates back and forth and names of battles, when what we do is we're gathering evidence, we're making arguments, we're putting things in context, we're analyzing different types of evidence. And for many of the students, they don't quite understand that's what historians do. So I have tried to do things in my class where we talk about how our ideas about the past, with new evidence or new interpretations change. And one thing I'll do is in the middle of a lecture, instead of I'll just stop and I say, we're going to do a little in-class group work, and we're going to get together in little groups, and I give them a text or an image they haven't seen that's related to what I've been lecturing about, and I ask them in their group to talk about it and see if they can understand it and read it within and interpret it within the context that I've given them so far in lecture, and they've been reading. And I take out a good 10 minutes of my class doing this activity, and they, in a group will write up some answers. I have them, I like your PG-13 thing, because they have to have a group name. They have to create a group name. And then what I do, everyone who participates gets the full credit if they participate. But then the next time we have class, I'll put up, some of the best answers we got, and I'll put up the kind of the honorable mention teams and the winning teams, and the students love this kind of competition. They want to know, is that extra points? And I go, no, just stars, but you guys can have that pride of being the winning team, and I'll share some of the answers. And as the semester goes on, I start seeing when I'm doing this, they're like, okay, let's see if we can be the team that gets mentioned, and they get creative. There's always honorable mention for creative name of team too. But I've decided we're excited about our disciplines, and especially when we're teaching a class where most people are not in our discipline, then it's up to us to try to share what's fascinating about our discipline and how is what I'm teaching you here in Western Civ and, who is Attila the Hun or whatever, how does that connect to what the discipline is doing and what's going on in the discipline in the academic study? So.
Thank you. Fantastic. There's been a lot of thought-provoking material, and we do want to leave some time for Q&A, so I'd come back to the panel with one final question, and perhaps, David, we can start with you and then work our way down the panel from right to left. Thinking about what would you like the audience to take away from what they heard today? So what is one small practical idea colleagues could try in their own large classes?
Yeah, I mean, engagement means a lot of things, but anything to get them from just being passive, just sitting in the chair and listening to you talk, right? And that's kind of true for really any size class. You really want to sort of motivate them to be engaged and to try to participate. Okay? And just because we have smartphones and things, technology, these tools, it doesn't mean you have to use them. So you don't feel like, gosh, I really need to use some kind of electronic response system, right? Cards work too. Just hand out colored cards and just to, can I see a show of hands? Who thinks it's A, right? So a lot of people they still do that, so they don't use it for grading. But again, it just gives information about how well, certain questions and topics have been received, and then that gives you feedback as the instructor. Say, okay, half the class didn't understand what I was just talking about, so let me just spend a couple more minutes going back over that, to make sure. So, all situations are different, but anything that you can do to really get them, not just being passive learners and sitting there, but to be active and participate.
Fantastic. Thank you. Zakiya?
So from an instructional standpoint, I'm really liking this whole tilt thing. Like, I'm all in on that because I think helping students to understand the why engages them in not just do it because I said to do it, but this is the relevance. And I think that that's incredibly important for them to be able to see the connections. Sometimes when it's a topic that's near and dear to them or very far from them. But the other thing that really resonates with me is validating their curiosity and validating them in this whole process, messy process of learning. Because most of the time they're scared out of their minds. And not only that, but they are incredibly afraid of being, of looking like they're not the smartest kid in the room. They're afraid of being wrong. And there's such stigma attached to all of that. And so how we validate their curiosity, how do we set that psychological safety up, is incredibly important to them, both because asking questions, that's part and parcel for most of what we do, but particularly for being scientists, which is where I am. And so helping them to understand the why and then to be curious themselves is incredibly important to me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dan, one small practical idea colleagues could try in their own large classes.
So I have a little demo. We're going to do a 2-minute technology-free retrieval routine because they stole all the QR code ideas that I use, so I had to come up with a different angle. Just kidding. But no, I know a lot of professors don't want to use technology, scared of technology. Half the time, the Wi-Fi doesn't work, so they get annoyed with technology, right? There's a lot of reasons why technology is awesome. There's a lot of reasons why practically it backfires. Okay. So when people learn something, right, just a little Chapter 8 memory of Psych 101, you're paying attention to some sensory stimuli, right? Right now, it's the sound of my monotone voice. So you have to be paying attention to it for it to get into your sensory memory. From there, it goes into your short-term memory for about 20 seconds, and you have to do something with it to get it into your long-term memory. But what we ask our students to do is then retrieve it, right? Weeks later for an exam, for an assignment, something like that. And I don't think students know how to practice retrieval. So one very easy thing you can do is have students practice retrieval right at the beginning of class. So I'll show you 3 different variations of it. Okay. When I ask the question, I want you to take 10 seconds to think of the answer, and then I want you to turn to someone next to you and share it with you. So this is a think, pair, share kind of thing. David was a competitive curler for how many years? Okay, so think. Okay, now turn to the person next to you. See if you guys can figure it out.
I know. We can cheat.
Okay, anybody think they have it? Anybody think they have it? It was 20 years. So what I would do in my real class is ask a question from 2 or 3 classes ago to show how quickly memories deteriorate and how important it is to be studying consistently what we call distributed practice, right? Why cramming doesn't work and why we overestimate our memories. Okay, so that's one variation of it. Another one, okay, so in Maribel's demo, what question did she ask you to enter in? What question did she ask you to answer using her technology? So this one, you don't have to do think, pair, share. Think about it for 20 seconds, and then I'm going to have you raise your hand if you think you know it. Okay, so I think you were the first hand.
There were 2 questions. The first was for you to check which of these activities do you define as engagement in the classroom, the list of activities. You also had another option. And then the second question was, what questions do you want answers to today?
Okay, so yeah, what does engagement look like to you, and what questions do you have? Excellent. So who else had that? Raise your hand if you also got that. Okay, so right now I'm getting feedback, right? If I just taught something and I don't see a lot of hands, I have to teach it differently. I have to go over it. But there's a big problem, right? Zakaya has talked about it. Everybody's talked about it, the psychological safety. I don't want to raise my hand if I was wrong. So this is depending on the culture of your classroom, this is another variation I have. Okay. David asked, what is most responsible for the mass of a tree? So if you think you have it, let's take 10 seconds to try to remember. Okay, so now I want everybody to close your eyes. Okay, so the correct answer was air. Raise your hand if you remembered air. Okay, you can put your hands down and open your eyes. So sometimes, if you guys were younger, I'd have you put your head down and raise your hand, right? That's a little more fail-safe. Sometimes they like doing that. You know, they haven't done that since kindergarten, but you're all adults and instructors and professors, so I didn't want you to have to do that. So the eyes closed works too. But again, I saw a lot more people raise their hands when there wasn't that social comparison. You know, it eliminates that variable. And you also can see, right, we learned to err after we learned what Maribel told us, after we learned about David curling for 20 years. So you can see the memory interference. You see how important it is, again, to keep up with your studying and not cram because it all gets jammed together. So that's my demo. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Maribel, to you, what is one small practical idea colleagues could try in their own large classes?
I don't know how practical this is, but really creating an environment where students feel welcome, know that you're interested in being there and wanting to be there and wanting to teach them, and that they can approach you and ask you questions. And especially at the very beginning of the semester, when you get all those crazy emails and this, that, and the other, work at responding. If you can respond right away, it really will surprise a lot of students how fast they can get responses. And then things start mellowing out, and then you know there's fewer emails. But that would be my thing. But work on creating a community, the classroom as a community for learning.
Fantastic. No, thank you. And We have a few minutes left. I have a lot of questions. I'm sure you do as well. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists based on what you've heard today or issues you've encountered in your own classroom. If we just ask you briefly so we can make sure we get in as many questions as we possibly can, and also to let you know the session is being recorded for those who are unable to join us. And so when you do have a question, please just make sure you wait until you receive the microphone so that we will make sure we get both the question and the response recorded for those who will be watching later. So questions for our panel.
I'll be quick with the question. The question is how to make your students more independent.
Sure. How to make your students more independent? Who would like to handle that question?
Oh Lord. All right. So I love my students and I love teaching, and I love creating an environment and being thoughtful about creating an environment that's optimal for their learning. Okay, I love that. But I also understand that I'm dealing with humans, and humans are going to human. And for me, what that means is that I can create as much as I can create, but they make decisions, right? And so I respect their decisions. And sometimes that's hard because I put my heart into everything that I'm trying to do. And so fostering independence for me is respecting that they have the right to respond to the content and the things that we have that are going on, and to talk with them about the responsibility of them showing up and engaging and choosing to learn. But it is a choice. It's a deeply personal choice, and it's something that they have to do. And so for me, fostering independence means I set up an environment that's great for them, but I also and I tell them this is what it takes. Like my tilting the lessons means this is what it takes to be successful here. But then you have to make the decision to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the philosophy and the ways in which I approach it.
Yeah, I would say real quickly, I tell them I have high expectations for them. They're in college now, but I'm also here to give them high support. So that comes from the 10 to 25 teaching book. But I'll say, a lot of people ask that question throughout the years, and so I've made a really good guide on Moodle. Why don't you check out the guide on Moodle and then come back to me if you still have questions? So I'm still offering high support, but 90% of the time, they just need to be told there's a resource they can look at, and then they can figure it out.
Terrific. Thank you. Additional questions? Yes.
Hi, so I'm currently teaching a recitation for CSC 2262, so it's like a math class for computer science majors. I try to give my students low stakes questions so they can have a small win, and at times they just will not answer, and I'll tell them, well, hint, the answer is on the board. And they still won't answer. And I'll go, well, hint, the answer's right here, and I'll point at it, and I'll circle it, and I'll look at it, and still no one's answering. I don't know when do I stop, because I've also had where I'll call on a specific student and say, okay, why don't you answer? And I'll ban all the kids that always answer the questions. And I'll say, why don't you answer? And I see the panic in their eyes, and I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't pick on them either. So I find myself at a loss. So yeah, I don't know, what do I do, guys?
So how do we get our students to engage in that situation?
This is not exactly that situation, but there have been times when I'll have a class that it does not respond to my asking questions, getting them to answer. And so I've done things, and low-tech things, where I will ask a question and they just anonymously write it down, an answer anonymously on a card, and then we switch cards around. And then I start saying, hey, what do people have on their on their cards? It's not your card. Well, this card says the answer is X. And I go, oh, do we think that's right or wrong? Does anyone else have X as the answer, or what? And part of it is that they are petrified. Many of them are petrified. And they'll say what you said at the very beginning, there's more people in this classroom than in my entire high school, and they'll say things like that. So I think we have to think about ways where they can talk, at least in the beginning. And then by the end of the semester, when they're feeling more confident, more independent, maybe they'll talk, but.
Yeah, in my demonstration 1 where I had you turn to your partner, then that's a great way. So think about it for a certain amount of time, pair up with the person next to you and talk about it. What did you guys come up with? And then share it as a group. It really diffuses that social anxiety. So I would try that. I would also ask, put up a QR code. Why aren't you guys answering questions? And they might say, I'm scared of some aspect of the class. They might say, I don't know it. And, so I would just ask for feedback, anonymous feedback.
And at the risk of saying something out loud, so it's typical, like certainly in the physics class, there's like 25% of the students are fantastic. I mean, they're going to med school, right? They're engaged students, they're disciplined, they're energetic. I need every point, I need every point, I need every point, right? So they're highly motivated. You've got 50 to 60 sort of in the middle that most of the things that I do from a pedagogical standpoint, those are the students I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to take that middle group of students and elevate them up, okay? But you got 15% of the students at the bottom. I'm not saying that your student is this person, but it's like they don't come to class, they don't ask questions, they don't do the homework, they do horrible on the exams, I never see them. And it's like, if this student is going to work so hard to get as little out of their college experience as possible, I am not going to stand in their way of doing that, right? And so we have some of those students, and it's like you really must pull them aside. So why are you at the university? It's clearly, it's more than just them being scared to answer, or that kind of thing, not wanting to participate. It's just they don't want to be there. They don't want to do the work. So there is some of that. So you can spend a lot of energy, right, trying to go after those students in that situation, and I think you will find it's unrewarding to do that.
I'll just throw out one more thought, and I've struggled with this one. How low stakes to make an assignment? So if it's 0 stakes, then sometimes they literally will not engage. Okay? If it's medium stakes, similar to what Dave shared earlier, where you get part of the credit for participation, part of it for correctness, I've found that can be more useful. Because they know that there's some points that's tied to them actually trying. And I've struggled with that because I've experimented some semesters where I've done 0 stakes, like, y'all, I just want y'all to practice and to do the think, pair, share as a combination with it. And I found that does not work as well if there are not some stakes attached to it. And so thinking through the strategy of how strong are those stakes for any of the individual assignments is another thing to think about.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to our panel for a really thought-provoking presentation today. Thank you so much for your participation. If this is a topic that is of interest to you, the Board of Regents is sponsoring another faculty learning community opportunity, and the information is being projected on the screen behind us. I'd also like to thank Bailey Banta, Kelsey Brannon, Jackie Bach, and Jenny Baumgartner for all the work they did in putting this together today. And please join me one more time in thanking our panelists for the presentation. And thank you for coming.